The Middle Ages of Europe is usually associated with knights, lords, and kings striving to build up their power and expand their territories. Women are usually left out of the historical narrative. However, the era was not lacking in powerful or intelligent women. Their stories are just not commonly told. The following is the story of five, actually six women of the Middle Ages in Europe that everyone should know something about. The first on our list is Hildegard von Bingen. She was born into a noble family in 1098 as the youngest of 10 children. She was sent to live in a monastery at the age of 8. Yes, just 8 years old. Hildegard was given an education by her superior, Jutta von Sporheim, a distant cousin who helped Hildegard adjust to monastery life and then excel in the realm of academia. Jutta trained Hildegard and cultivated her love for learning as she recognized that she was a gifted young woman. When Jutta passed away, Hildegard became the head mistress of the convent and began to write music, poems, books, and over 400 influential letters. Hildegard started to write her first of many books in 1140. One of her works contained 9 volumes. She wrote about church theology, medicine, natural science, and much more. The Catholic Church has given her the title of Doctor of the Church, a position held by only 34 people who contributed mightily to the Church's theology. Out of the 34 people, only 4 are women. She also wrote a treasure trove of letters from popes to kings and queens like Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine to anyone that was seeking spiritual or medical advice from her. It didn't matter what their status was, she would happily oblige and write back. She also wrote 77 musical compositions and is seen as one of the first composers of Western style music. She wrote the songs for her fellow nuns to sing, but travelers love to sit and listen to the beauty of her works, and even current recordings of her compositions have done well within the classical music scene. Being a well educated woman of her time was not always easy. Once a king decided to put her to the test and sent 2 urine samples to her to see if his wife was pregnant, as Hildegard stated that she had figured out how to do a pregnancy test. The one sample showed that the woman was pregnant, while the other, as Hildegard deduced, showed that it came from a male and he was not with child or pregnant. The king was pleased to see that she passed the test and that his wife was pregnant. Hildegard faced other tests and conflicts. In fact, the Pope had placed her convent under the direct control of the Bishop of Mainz, taking away her power, as she refused to have the body of a boy dug up and removed from her convent cemetery. The church stated that he was excommunicated after death, while she argued that he had died in the hands of God while receiving his last rites. She also had some other minor run ins as she allowed women of her monastery to wear their hair long and open. Some even placed flowers in their hair. Hildegard died before the conflict about the boy had ended, but she left a legacy as a polymath and a lady that stood by her convictions. Next on our list is Empress Theodora, an actress from humble origins that would eventually rise to serve alongside her husband, Justinian I, the Emperor of the Byzantine Empire. Her father was a bear keeper, and her mother was an actress at the Hippodrome. The Hippodrome was a large arena used for chariot races and other events in the capital. Now, remember, the Byzantine Empire considered themselves to be the Roman Empire. Rome fell in the west in 476, but continued on in the east with its capital of Constantinople. If you would have been alive during the reign of Justinian, you would have not called yourself a Byzantine, you would have called yourself a Roman. Now, marriages between emperors and women of lowly status were not unheard of in the Byzantine Empire. Sometimes winners of beauty contests would find themselves soon after in the royal courts. so a marriage between an actress and an emperor would not be unheard of. What surprised the people of Constantinople was the amount of power and influence Theodora would have. When Justinian was crowned emperor in 527 CE, his wife was crowned as an empress and not a consort. The ceremony was lavish and heralded as the start of a new era. Justinian sought to reclaim the territory Rome used to possess and began conquering large swaths of land in the Mediterranean. However, the cost of the military adventures became too burdensome for the people of Constantinople, and they rose up in revolt in 532 due to taxation and a few other issues at the Hippodrome. The Nika revolt caused extensive damage to Constantinople. Justinian fled to the ports and was ready to escape the city, but Theodora would not. She stood her ground and refused to leave. Historian Procopius wrote that Theodora stated at this moment, "I do not care whether or not it is proper for a woman to give brave counsel to frighten men, but in moments of extreme danger, conscience is the only guide. Every man who is born into the light of day must sooner or later die. And how can an emperor ever allow himself to become a fugitive?" The couple remained, and the generals were able to put down the revolt. After all of the violence ended, Justinian rebuilt the city and made the Hagia Sophia in its present form. In 542, a catastrophic form of the bubonic plague hit the empire. Justinian fell ill, and Theodora ruled alone while he fought for his life. She appointed friends and acquaintances to high ranking positions within the court, but she also focused on charitable work for the poor and helping hospitals and orphanages throughout her reign, and also when she ruled alone. This was also needed, as around 50% of the population of Constantinople will die of the plague. On one day alone, it is written that 10,000 people died. Justinian did eventually recover and assume his position again, but Theodora had left her mark. She passed away in 548 of cancer. Justinian continued to reign another 17 years, but never remarried and did not have an heir. Next on our list is a queen from the English shores, Ethelfled. Alfred the Great is the only English king to have the title of the Great in English history. He pushed back against the Viking invasions during his reign and established a court centered on scholarship. It was in this atmosphere that his daughter, Ethelfled, was raised. She was given a strong and thorough education with a private tutor, just like her brother had, the future King Edward. Ethelfled married the king of Mercia, Ethelred. The Vikings started to raid England in 793 and launched full on invasions in the 860s. Ethelred continued to fight against the Vikings while also working with his wife to recruit clerics and scholars to come to their kingdom and expand upon their dedication to scholarship. Their court was known for the pursuit of knowledge, and even King Edward of Wessex sent his son to be raised and educated by their scholars. In the early 900s, Ethelred fell ill, and Ethelfled ruled the kingdom. She enlarged her army and was known for her talent as a military strategist. When a Norwegian king invaded the city of Chester, she positioned infantry troops outside of her city and cavalry inside and kept the gates open. Her plan was for the infantry to fall back into the city to give the perception of a retreat. And then, when the Vikings would come into the city, the cavalry would catch the ensuing troops off guard. And her plan worked. However, the fighting was taking longer than expected, and so some citizens of Chester came out to help by pouring hot beer on the Vikings from the walls of the city. In 910, Ethelfled's husband died, and she assumed sole rule of her kingdom. She worked on building fortified settlements throughout the territory to help defend against the Viking attacks. She also went on the offensive when need be. For the next 200 years, historians and writers wrote about the queen's power and rule, and that it might have been even greater than Alfred's. When Ethelfled died, her daughter took over the kingdom and ruled for a few months. Unfortunately, her uncle, King Edward, came in and deposed of her power and took over the kingdom. The Mercians resented this move, but when Edward's son, Ethelstan, who was raised in their kingdom, took the throne, they accepted his leadership. Our next queen is known by many as her legacy has remained strong throughout the centuries. Eleanor of Aquitaine influenced the arts, literature, and even politics in the late 12th and early 13th century. Eleanor married King Louis VII of France and had two daughters. Their marriage was a rough one, and they clashed culturally and personally. The couple sought counsel from the Pope after attending to the Second Crusades, but they still could not find an agreement. And with the pressure from the French court to have Louis find a new wife, they finally had their marriage annulled in 1152 by the Pope. 8 weeks after the annulment, Eleanor married King Henry II of England. The couple had 8 children, 5 sons and 3 daughters. While reigning in England, Eleanor had a great influence on the arts and literature and helped to promote a new form of romantic poetry. Henry II and Eleanor's relationship waned over time as she was unable to influence the English king as she had her first husband, and his numerous affairs caused her shame in the court. So she left England and returned to France. Her son Richard, the future Richard the Lionheart, King of England, came with her, along with her daughter Marie from her first marriage. In 1173, Eleanor and Henry's eldest son rose up in revolt against his father. Henry the young king's rebellion lasted 18 months and caused death and destruction, but came to an end with the king forgiving his son. Instead, Henry II sent troops to capture Eleanor and bring her back to England to be held in prison for her support of her son's treasonous ways. She was imprisoned for 16 years. Henry II concluded that Eleanor had started the revolt. When Henry II passed away, Richard the Lionheart took the throne, as Henry the young king had already passed away from dysentery. Soon after assuming the throne, Richard I left for the Third Crusades and made his mother regent. Eleanor focused on the affairs of England and ruled with her son John. When Richard was kidnapped on his way back from the Crusades, she raised the money for his release and personally traveled to Austria to free her son. When Richard died in battle and John was crowned king, Eleanor returned to France and served as an envoy. She assisted with powerful marriage arrangements with her grandchildren and eventually retired as a nun and passed away at the age of 82. The final story involves rival queens, Brunhilde and Fredegund. Now, this is a story made for the movies. The two reigned in the 6th century in kingdoms in Western Europe. Power, murder, revenge, and war were associated with the queens early in their reigns, yet both contributed to their territories, adding to the prestige of their lands. In 567, Brunhilde married King Sigebert of Austrasia. Now, their territory stretched from the North Sea down through the Rhine River and all the way over to the Champagne region in France. Now, the wedding alarmed Chilperic, Sigebert's younger brother, who shared a 300-mile border with him. After the royal marriage, Chilperic offered Brunhilde's father 1/3 of his territory for the hand of Brunhilde's older sister in marriage, an offer the king would not say no to. And so the two wed. Now, the marriage was not going to be a long and happy one. After discovering that her husband was having an affair, Brunhilde's sister was murdered by Chilperic's mistress, Frudegunde. Adding to the conspiracies and gossip of the era, Friedegunda's marriage